What's up, Liron here, and today we're going to review work by Dean Mitchell. What's up, Liron here. Thank you for joining me in another episode of Painting Masters. This is episode 25, and by this point we can say for sure that every Thursday it's going to be a new Painting Masters episode, so I'm going to make sure I write it down somewhere on my channel banner or something like that. But today's topic is Dean Mitchell, a very renowned American painter, works in oils, watercolor, and also acrylics. I haven't seen a lot of mentions of acrylics wherever I read about him on Wikipedia and so on, but his acrylic work is my favorite. So if you've been longing for a bit of a different episode, this time we're going to focus on all types of his art, when we're going to start with acrylics, which are my personal favorites by his, and then watercolor, and then finally oil. Okay, so if you've been looking for a bit of a different episode, this is the one we're going to finally cover more extensively, medium that's not watercolor. Dean Mitchell, he does a lot of paintings that deal with the life of the African American community. You will see a lot of figurative work. That's the thing he's most renowned for. And what I will say is his, aside from his mastery of the technique, that's obvious, you can tell he's a master of that, he also is a master of planning very carefully the emotion and the way the character makes you feel, I suppose, the figure that he paints, whether it's a full portrait or it's figurative and you can see the entire person's body, or just people walking in the street. There's some cleverness to it in the way he does it that's very unique. It's very mature, I would say, and it just feels very real. That's the best way I can put it. So we will hopefully notice this in the figurative work, and then of course there are some landscapes and some cityscapes that I think are really, really beautiful. So I think you're going to enjoy this one. Finally, a bit of a different one, and also you'll notice how the pacing is slower. I decided to take my time and talk a bit more slowly, unlike this intro, so I think you're going to really enjoy that. And I also have the names of the paintings. So without further ado, let's get started. So according to the Wikipedia entry on Dean Mitchell, he works mostly in watercolor and oils, but you will now see why his acrylics are actually my favorites. So we're going to start with acrylics, then we're going to go over watercolor, and finally oils, okay? Hopefully you can hear me well. So this is the first one, and it's just beautiful. I love, the main thing that I love about his work is how he works in patches, okay? This is something that is obviously not as evident in watercolor, because it's best utilized in more opaque mediums where you can actually work in these kinds of very distinct patches. John Singer Sargent also has that distinct look of patches, I would say, more than any artist that I've become more familiar with lately. So here, take a look at the face, and you can see how I just love the fact that you can see individual patches of paint. And so you got all the transitions from the very darks of the hair and the clothes. Then if you move on to the lighter areas, and this is really a trip for someone who's, it's really weird for someone who paints with watercolor, because I would assume a part of his technique is working from dark to light. And I'm so accustomed to working from light to dark that it really baffles me to actually paint the highlights. So I imagine him painting the highlights on these paintings. I'm going to show you some more, and it looks beautiful, and I really like it. I like the way he chose to simplify, but also notice how he does use a lot of details where possible. So if you look at the hair, and again, hopefully you can see this well here, there is quite a lot of detail here to the left that you can see in the hair. That works really well. I love how he treated the beard here with that strong highlight, and his color harmonies they feel a little unique to me. It's like they work well, and they're very classic in that, you know, the blues and the oranges, and it all looks very, on the one hand, very usual, but to me at least, it seems like he minimizes his selection to only several colors, and And it's not necessarily the most obvious ones, and I love that. I love that kind of thing. And notice how, again, the very light details on the clothes, but the more you get into the center of attention, the more detailed it is. The composition is also something that works really well. Usually when you paint a person in this kind of position, or even in a three-quarter view, when they don't look directly at you, it's very common to leave more space to the right of the person's face than to the left. If they look to the right, meaning the direction in which they face, it's more common to leave more room there because it just looks better. And even when I crop this part of the video, I'll leave more space to the left because I'm looking more towards the left from your angle, or to the right, to the left of the, whatever. You get what I mean. If I look here, I'm going to leave more space here. If I look there, I'm going to leave more space there. That's a very common thing to do, and it looks really good. Let's see what else we got. I thought I'd jump between different subjects because I think every subject has its own things. Now, when he does the more landscapes and cityscapes type of work, it seems to me like he really focuses on one element and then he abstracts everything else. So, for example, here we have this, I don't know, church-like building, I would say. And notice how everything that's besides that is not as important. So you have the mountains here in the background, maybe a lake or a river, whatever that is, and then you have a piece of land, but there isn't really any detail here, which I love. I love that, and it allows you to focus on what's important, which is this part of the building, the window, and all sorts of interesting details. Especially, I love the way he treated the different details on the roof, the shingles, the window, and it almost looks like watercolor, but what I would guess is, and this is acrylics, acrylics, what I would guess is that he just used more water to dilute them. By the way, all of these have names by the picture, based on the picture name is that, so that's Sunday morning, which makes sense, church. The previous one is R.T. Williams' Buffalo Soldier. So I can tell you the names if that's something that interests you. I usually don't do that, but in any case, I love this one. Let's see what else we got here. This one's called Blue Bike. Okay, so Blue Bike. And again, here you'll notice that all of this section, there's nothing here. And this is something a lot of people fear, to leave a large blank space. They don't know if it'll work. It can be scary because large shapes that don't play a role, they can be dangerous. But what he does, and he does it really masterfully, is he is able to reduce the details and clutter while still allowing the subject to, I guess, have an important role. So this road, the way he divides it up and the way there's this line going here and the way these parts in the shadow, it just looks so good. And then there's a big mess near the trash can, but still quite simplified if you look at this. And his work is there's a lot of simple shapes, straight lines and simple shapes in many different areas. And then, of course, we have some curvy lines in the bicycle. I love this one as well. I love how the change from light to dark and then how it affects the colors. Notice here. And it's one of those things that really fascinate me when I paint. How a certain paint will look when it's in the shadow. It's a question I ask myself a lot. Here's another one of my favorites here, Urban America. Notice I love the figures that are a little more zoomed out. I love portrait work, and of course, but when you can see the entire figure, I don't know, there's just something about it that I find really interesting. And again, a lot of this is rather empty, but the composition in this one is genius, the way he placed them. And it kind of follows the rule of thirds loosely, I would say. But again, this is just a guideline. You don't have to. And what I mean by that is that these two people are on the, let's say, left third of the painting. And then there's some more details here around the right third. And also height-wise, they're starting around the lower third. But, that's, again, it's just a general guideline. But notice how he gets away with doing this huge wall with nothing almost on it, just this window and some details here near the entrance or storefront or whatever that is. I don't even know what it is. But he is able to get away with it. And then he also gives us some details near the foreground. And you can see here the bit of grass coming out of next to the light pole or electricity pole, whatever that is. And again, notice the subdued color palette. very muted colors, a lot of muted greens, and then this usage of red here, maybe on a sweater or something like that tied around this person, and that is red. And this really pulls us in, so the color is a little more vibrant. You'll notice the entire scene, I think almost completely is muted, but then we have this little stain here that really pulls you in and sets this guy probably as a focal point, and then this guy is a supporting character. Or, you know, the different heights also may play a role. What else did I want to say? Oh yeah, I love how he is able to simplify it into such simple shapes. Like, there's nothing here. Notice how this is the white cream color. It's not completely white. There's a bit of yellow in it, and then these brush strokes, and it's really simplified. This guy's face is just a shadow side and a light side, and maybe a bit of red in between and a bit of purple here, and hopefully you can see it. It's a bit hard to see, but this works really, really well. Let's see. Next up, this one's called Carol. I think it's Carolyn. I think it's a mistake in the file name. Again, a beautiful one. And here the composition is not so obvious. It's like the figure is right in the center. However, there is a lot of open space in front of it to the right. So it does feel like there's some breathing space for you to, when you look at it. Now we have the door here. Who knows what that is, but the figure is kind of leading you to the door, and then this shadow connects here. Just genius. I love, 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 love this kind of thing. You notice the shadow here. And again, he gets away with large shapes, not a lot of details. You notice how a supporting actor here is her earring that really pulls you into the main part of the painting of the face. And it looks so good. And then there's the hat for added interest. I don't know. It's just a beautiful scene to me. Let's see what else we got here. We have a few more acrylics, and then we're going to jump into some watercolor, and then we'll pick up the pace, I think. Again, when it's a landscape, he really simplifies it. This one is sunny. And notice how, again, the very unique composition in that the lower section really takes up a very small part of the screen. If I'll check, that's 1, 2, 3, 4. So about a fifth is ground here, and the rest is just plain empty sky. And it works really, really well. And there is some variation, of course. You can see some of the brush strokes, or maybe it's a palette knife. I'm really unfamiliar with the technique of acrylics. I actually made one painting in acrylics, and it was super hard for me. So I'm I don't know anything about it by any stretch. But you can see some of the work with the brush or the whatever he used. And a lot of sharp, contrasty shapes that really build the shape of this, maybe, I don't know, a barn or a house in the middle of a rural area. So I love that. And again, the muted greens, I love them so much, and how he uses these individual variations. So you have here something that's a little more brown, then a bit more green, then this maybe road leading to the house or a driveway even is yellow, and then again green. Works so well. Next up, watercolor. So this is the first watercolor I wanted to show you because it's my favorite, probably. This one's called Napoleon House. I don't know if it's Napoleon's house in any way or by where it got his name. If you know, leave a comment down below, as always. And look at that. I have to zoom in a bit. And same principle of simplification, but here you get a bit of a different approach, I would say. And I love how it seems like he worked in thin glazes a lot here, because you can tell all of these different layers, and I don't know, I wouldn't know to guess, but I think he had this warmer underpainting for the building and around this area and the pavement, and then maybe wet on wet even he glazed on top of that another layer of blue that makes these, especially the street level, merge like that. And the shadows here, I love the shape, and this is, again, this kind of a tunnel effect that pulls you in, so you get to see this very dark piece of roof with, I forgot how you call these things, but I'm going to remember in just a moment, scaffolds maybe, but I don't know if it's that, because scaffolding is usually for buildings in process of building, but in any case, and then you have this small figure here in the background that you can barely see, and it's very abstracted, and then the cars here, and And I just love that, everything about it. And you can probably see some of the drawing preparation here, maybe some pencil lines. And these buildings are really reduced to nothing. So I would say that one is terrific. And it's actually, again, the Wikipedia entries and everything talk about how he's using watercolor a lot. But from what I see, the acrylics and oils as well are very, very skillfully made, not just by technique, but also the thought process behind the idea and the character and the emotion. I think I love that today's episode is a little slower paced. I actually enjoy that. Here we have some boats, and I love this rust together with the blue, and how smart it is to put the boat that is the center of interest, probably, with all of these interesting colors. So we got some red here pulling us into it. He always knows how to put one detail that'll pull you into the center of attention, and it works beautifully. And then we have this beautiful combination of orange or brown, kind of orange, and then together with a cerulean-ish blue, I would say, and then that makes this boat really the focus of attention, because you need to bring some interest to it, because we have this one in the foreground that's so close to us. But then he also makes the most out of this one, because you can see some of the details, so he added them. And then there's another one here, and I bet his work process is a little slower and more calculated, the way I see it, at least. I don't know, I could be mistaken, but it seems like he is taking his time a little more than some other impressionistic artists, and I think he leans more towards the accuracy and to some degree towards the realism as well. Although I wouldn't say his work is necessarily anything close to hyperrealism or anything like that. I love all the wires running here. This central mast, probably. It's just such a beautiful work. This boat in the background, what's beautiful about it is that there is a touch of paint, because he knows he has to somehow connect it to the rest of the painting. So this one's so at the front, if he'd put like a bright red here or something like that, that'll completely take our attention towards here. But he really is a master of directing our attention. This one's called On the Gulf. Let's see what else. I have another mustache hair. Threw it away. This one I really like. This is in China, I believe, Shanghai neighborhood. Another beautiful one, another street scene that's fully empty, and he loves those bicycles, you can tell. And the way he builds the scene is so smart. So you have this wall, a little warmer, some graffiti on it, then the street level is a little cooler, and then some details here receding into the background. And you wonder, is this figure going to turn here? It really makes you think. The story that he tells really makes you think, will it turn here? Notice all of these cast shadows and how they're very light. And they're not so dark, but it still is impactful. So these are the larger shapes. But then if you look at the smaller things he implants here just to help your eye travel and find the interest points, we have the figure, obviously, with the colors that are the most saturated. So you have this very strong saturated red, very strong and saturated blue. You get to see some of the phthalo-ishness of it here. If that's a word, phthalo-ishness. And then the secondary points of interest, I would say, are around the bicycle here with this drapery going on it, the laundry, the air-conditioned engine, and all of this alley that's a little more blended in together. But he just builds it so smartly. Notice how with this bicycle, he didn't even put in all of the details with the tires and the wires or the rings, the metal pieces through them. You can barely see them, and it works so well. And again, these thin glazes, I love that. It kind of reminds me of how Peter Schiller paints walls with a lot of thin glazes. The style is completely different, but still, that specific aspect. And notice how the shadow of the figure has some variation in it. So here, you have a bit of a burnt sienna kind of feel brown, but then more towards the center of the shadows, there's a bit of blue, and then it goes back to warm. I don't know if that's on purpose, but it's really interesting. Probably is on purpose. There's a bit of sky here, a teeny tiny bit of sky. That's really cool. What else do I find interesting in this one? I think that's mainly it. Let's see what this one is. Hazel. I wanted to show a really up-close portrait in watercolor because we didn't see much. And notice how, and I think he may also work in tempera. It seems like some of his style I don't know if this one in particular, and if you know about tempera more than I do, because I don't know much about it, just from Stan Miller's tutorials. I know that it helps the paint stay alive for longer, and so it kind of turns water. It gives the water more of an oily characteristic, and it helps. And this look kind of reminds me of works I've seen that were done maybe with tempera, but I'm not sure. I couldn't tell. And I love how the face is treated really with a very blended and blurred method, and not too much worried, but too much worry about the specific accuracy of where one shape ends and another begins, but the accuracy of the expression is what really captures my imagination here, and the way this person is looking at us or at something else. And I think this is hazel color. I'm not sure if hazel is blue green or is it something like that, like a brown green. I never know. So let me know again. I know nothing here. And yeah, I love the thin glazes on the shirt, and I think these work really well. Sorry if there's noise. I'm moving the mic a bit. And I think these work really well with the squares, and this is something I want to try doing a little more of getting some details in thinner glazes without overworking it, because right now I tend to overwork when I do these thin glazes. But in any case, next up we have this. I wanted to show you some kind of a landscape because there weren't any. I don't have too much to say about this other than it's really beautiful. We have a lot of I think the combination of vertical and horizontals here is really good, and it's just smart. The way it's built is really smart in every aspect of it, in every way. You get these very strong both verticals and horizontals, but the L shape here is really the thing I like the most with the trees. And then there are some trees in the background and some hint of trees, and these cut through all the way to the top. So they cut through the main front foreground layer, and then they cut through this part that recedes more into the distance. They cut through this small piece of land and the tree. They cut through this additional body of water. They cut through the mountains. They cut through the sky, and this is really the element that leads to the depth in the scene. Plus, he also allows their leaves and foliage to kind of blend in with the mountain in the background, and it works beautifully. These little droplets of water on the mountain also, it's just genius, everything in it. And the color scheme is really muted once again, but he did allow for some variation. So you can see the green here, and then some purple here, and then some orange here. So this really is a secondary color palette based painting, I would say. There's just a bit of hints of blue here and there, but for the most part, this is really based on the secondary colors and in a beautiful way. Now let's see what else we have here. Another one that I really, really loved. And again, notice how simple the background is. Then you have all of these beautiful small diagonal lights that may be bolts and stuff that are stuck to the wall, and then they cast this beautiful shadow. What else? There's a lot of transparency in some of the more muted details, some of these kinds of vertical shapes. The palm tree. How many times have I overworked palm trees? And this one is just perfect. It's not overworked at all. And hopefully you can see it and my face isn't there. But yeah, because I usually place my video here. Let's see what else we got here. And the name, by the way, is Dead End. Because it looks like this leads to nowhere. Let's see here. We have Osage House, or Osage, I don't know how you'd call it. Osage sounds Japanese, but who knows. A more bright scene with some happier light and shadow, I would say. But notice how these brush strokes are so smart, and it's very stylized. It's not necessarily imitating exactly what he sees, but in that stylization, it works really well. And I want to also show you this area with some touches of strong red and orange to the right. This dark shadow is incredible. I really love that. And the brick wall is beautiful. This is really, really cool. I love that. And you can see a lot of primary colors. So you can see a lot of yellow showing through. Then you can see some reds showing through here. And obviously some blues. And it's beautiful. And the green also, again, is very muted. Let's see what else. So now we get to the oils. I'm going to run through these. The quality of the pictures is a little lower. But here as well, I really like how the patches of paint once again play their role here. And if you zoom in really closely, and again, the quality isn't so, but you'll notice, and you focus on just in one individual color, you would see them for what they are, and it's really interesting to see this. And if you try to isolate them, it's a very sobering experience, because you're like, so if I would just look at this paint, I wouldn't have guessed that it will work here, and it does end up working, which is beautiful. So this is kind of a pink, and here we have a bit of trying to isolate the paint. This paint is really similar to the wall, actually. It's not the same, but it's similar. And then some touches of blue here in the beard. Just really smart. I like the cleanliness of the acrylics a little more. The oils feel a little more dirty to me, but still beautiful. Another one, and notice the hints of very bright red here to create the, let's say, I think the area that's more in the light. What else we have here? The blues here. The color scheme of this in particular painting I don't like as much. This gray of the shirt especially, I don't like it as much with the brown, but you know what, it does work, I can tell. What is this one? I love this color scheme. Actually, you know what, and now I'm trying to figure out what's the difference, because I really like this color scheme but not as much this one. I think maybe it's it feels to me like a mix of, the way I dislike this color scheme is that it kind of reminds me of the burnt sienna and phthalo blue mix that I personally don't like. And this one is more of a French ultramarine and burnt sienna. So that's kind of the difference for me. That's interesting. Here's another one that I love. Very strong and saturated paint. So this is really different in the context of the rest of his paintings. This one is really much more saturated. And beautiful, and it's not even, I think here he took even one step farther from realism, and it's much more I don't know if abstracted, but stylized, but it's still rooted very much in reality, and it's beautiful. I love this touch of cream colors among all of the oranges. It's just beautiful. And I think this is, and by the way, what are the names of these? I forgot. So this is Mr. Dan Bradford. This one is Head Study. Okay, that's an original name. This one is Green Bay Waterfront. And what do we have here? Gravity. And I think, okay, so one last painting after this one. So here, very empty. It's very empty. That's the main thing I would say. This is not really my favorite style, I would say. Not in terms of the color selection, but I did want to show you some of that. And there's the motorcycle here, and this probably trash can, but that's very light green. It's nice. I don't like really the color of this one. I don't know why I even included it. Well, probably just to show you an overview of everything. And this one I really like. This I really like the way he uses, not necessarily even the color scheme, but the way he uses the different colors. So you'll notice how he has a bit of that skin tone in the shirt, which is really cool. Then you have this bright orange that I really like, and it works really well with this bright blue that looks, I don't know even what it is. It looks like a mix of cerulean and French ultramarine or something like that. And then there's the hints of, like if you compare this area to this area, this one looks almost purple-ish. And then here brown, and then some touches of orange that look really well. And the highlights are, in fact, they look blue, but they're probably warmer than blue. They're probably closer to a warm brown. And again, simplified. I think here it looks a little odd because of the picture quality. So there was probably a bit more details that were missing. But in any case, so much attention to the details. Also here, notice the shape of the jaw, where it goes back and then connects to the ear. And then he puts this small genius shadow here that works really well. And I think that's the last work. So I hope you enjoyed. It's a bit of a slower paced episode today, showing you some different styles. Acrylics, I don't think I ever showed acrylics here in the paint show, so I'm quite happy about that. And also a lot of oils, which I did show in the past. And this is it. I hope you enjoyed this one. And now let's wrap up the video. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed seeing Dean Mitchell's work. just beautiful. And if anything, this encourages me to try out acrylics. I actually have a small canvas behind me there, a really tiny one that I got as a gift, and also some acrylic paints that I used like once or twice. But this is something I would be happy to try more of, although watercolor, you know, is my love. But in any case, I hope you enjoyed this one. Don't forget, if you have, to like and subscribe if you still haven't. If you're lurking, if you're watching and you're not subscribed, I would really appreciate it if you do. There's tons of series, tons of content that I think you would really enjoy. I'm trying to up my game and share more real-time tutorials, more stuff that will really interest you. I'm always looking for feedback, so let me know in a comment down below what your thoughts are and what you want me to talk about in particular, as well as particular artists and everything. So with that being said, let's wrap up this video. Take care, and I will talk to you again real soon.